All right. How's everyone doing? I think we are live. We're waiting to connect.
Yeah, it should be good.
Perfect. How's everyone doing? Welcome to our Section 1 Championship preview. Apologize for being a couple minutes late. As always, running into a little bit of tech issues, so trying to get that resolved. But welcome, everyone. I am your host, Frank Langella, joined by my co-host, Marcelio Langella. And Mars, we have reached it, the final show of the year, championship weekend. How's it going?
It's going well, man. I mean, the fact we're finally here, it's felt like the season was just flew by. And now that we're finally at the sectionals, back in Mayapack, it's not that far down the road. And
No.
not having to travel all the way to Arlington this year. So it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. And FAM Sports will be at the section title game. So Mars kind of revealed that we are going to be there. So we're excited to see the games in person. I want to welcome all of you. We appreciate you guys, as always, for tuning in. There's a couple things we're going to do before we get going. If you have any questions, make sure you shoot them into the chat. That's number one. Number two, we'll put in some polls on who you think are going to win these section title games. And don't worry about missing anything, because this is going to be on our channel, so you guys can always go back, clip it, do whatever you guys want with it. But this is our final show of the year. What happens after this week, once we determine the champions, we are going to work on our season awards and our all-star teams, which, again, we at the staff are going to put together, have the big vote here. But also we're going to get coaches' input. So we're going to reach out to the coaches to get their inputs. And our paid Patreon members also are going to have a vote as well. So they're going to get involved in that as well. We're excited to do that. So that's going to be fun. That's what happens after this. We'll go into our kind of end of the season coverage, which is the All-Star teams and our season awards for each class. And, when we talk about, the section title game, Mars, and a couple kind of messages, I know that we talk about FAM Sports as a future, but just talking about these games coming up tomorrow. Right, you have tomorrow and Saturday, and all of this work, all of this, going to these championships are really for this thing right here. This guy right here, right? This is the medal that you get a trophy, but this is the medal that the players and coaches get when winning a section title. And Mars, me and you have been in the football game, feels like a long time. A lot of people have been a lot longer than us. We're not that old, but as children. And, we have been part of playing and coaching for various different programs. And we've also experienced going to championships, winning championships, and losing championships in Section 1 and in the Catholic League. And so we know the highs and lows of what's about to take place this weekend. And a couple messages that I wanted to get across, Mars, and I'll let you kind of give, because I know that there are some players who watch our show, coaches, and parents who have also played this great sport. And this medal right here is not worth much, right? Physically. It's not a diamond. It's not a secret emerald. It's, you're not going to pawn this for a lot of money. But it's a message. It's a symbol of becoming a champion that is very hard to do in the sport of football. And it's all that hard work. It's all the energy. It's all the grinding, the highs and lows. It makes this football what the great sport that it is. And it can only be one of them. So although this itself is not worth a lot, this symbol, getting down in the history books, achieving something amongst your friends, your coaches, your community, is a huge deal. It's very hard to get to this moment. But one thing I wanted to just say is before, there's so much anxiety, there's so much intensity, talking about, what do we have to do to win this game. But I just want everyone to, at one moment, players and coaches, take a moment to sit back and reflect a little, because this takes a lot of work to get here. There's a lot of programs, there's a lot of players, coaches who struggle to get to the playoffs, who struggle to win playoff games. And to even get to this game and have an opportunity to be a champion is a big deal. So I know it's very hard to do right now. But everyone should take a moment. Pat yourself on the back a little. Reflect on the great, the grind that you went through to get here, right? Don't take that, and I say this as someone who, when you're in it, it's so hard to do that. And the losses actually sticked with me more than the wins, right? Because those are the ones that damage you, right? And the wins are so, you don't really feel it till afterwards. So I just want everyone to take a moment, the players, to reflect and say, man, what a great moment this is. All the work I put in, all the great memories, the practices, the games, the wins, the losses, to get to this very moment. The second message that I want to send is that no matter what happens tomorrow, there can only be one champion. The one regret that you don't want to have is that you didn't give it everything you had. There's going to be mistakes. There's going to be missed tackles, missed assignments. There's going to be great plays. But the one thing you don't want to regret, whether you win or lose, is that I could have done this a little harder. So whatever you do, whatever the score is, give it everything you have. And that can help you sleep at night, even whether it's a win or a loss. Mars, any messages that, and then we're going to kind of talk about FanSports Future, and let's dive into these games.
Yeah, I mean, you said it best already, but I'll kind of just usher in the idea that there's been a lot of people that have been out there and they've experienced section title games. And a lot of times people take that for granted, right? And there's this mantra that you don't know what the future holds. You don't know what's going to happen next year. You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And my advice for a lot of people is, and I think you said it already about not having regrets, because you don't know what could happen. Right? You might lose that opportunity. You could be a junior. You could say, hey, you know what? I'll just get back here next year. You don't know what's going to happen.
No.
So you need to take this in. You need to reflect, and you need to say, well, whatever my job is tomorrow or for Saturday, that's what I'm going to do. Right? I'm going to do best it to my ability and give everything I have. Because there's a lot of guys out there that never experienced a section title game. So in a lot of cases, it's a testament to the hard work you put in. But at the same time, it's an opportunity that you don't want to miss out on. So, it's a mixture of both there for me.
Absolutely. And with that, one final thing, and then we'll kind of get into what everyone's looking for the games, is, the future of FanSports. And we're a very small group. There's no question about it. When you guys come here, we always wanted to provide genuine coverage to you. And we might get some takes wrong. We might get picks wrong. We might get picks right. But we wanted to provide coverage for this community, Section 1 football, Hudson Valley Football League, to the players, to the coaches, to the fans, a unique way of covering that we don't usually get from other avenues here. And not to downgrade any other avenue that coverage, but covering high school sports is difficult. And we're a very small group. We're not funded by a corporation. We don't have sponsors. But we'd love to one day, of course. But this is just a couple guys who wanted to provide the best coverage we can to the people in this area. Now, I say this only because, after every year, just to give you clarity on what we do, we evaluate ourselves on how we can grow and get better. And if we can't grow and get better, there's always the uncertainty that FanSports can't continue. And so I'm not saying this to scare folks, but I just want to be honest and genuine with everyone that, you don't know what the future is. And every year, there's not a certain future. And so I say this as a thank you to everyone, no matter what happens to FanSports, which our goal is to try to continue and grow. Make no mistake about it. But, we're reach a tough point in our lives too, where we have a lot of commitments. No matter what happens to FanSports, it has, been a lot of fun covering football for you guys. So I just wanted to say that, and just such a special thanks to our Patreon members who have been so vital, and the messages, even non-Patreon members, the messages that we get. Hey, when is the FanSports show coming? Really love the sports show. Really love. So, we evaluate at the end of every year. The hope is to continue, but the future is uncertain. And, we'll make announcements going forward, but our goal is to try to continue. It's not guaranteed, but I just want to give a thank you to all our supporters. That's something that I really wanted to drive home with that message. All right, Mars. We're already seeing comments in. Guys, again, if you have any questions, shoot them in there. George Harris, 100%. Lords went from section champions to barely winning 3 games in 2 years. Absolutely, George. Right? That's the point. You really don't know the future. Take advantage of the opportunities that you have right in front of you. But But Mars, season-wise, last week I went 5-3. Mars, you went 5-2. So you did get a win on me last week. The season record is I'm up on you 5-2 with 2 pushes. So I won the season award. Bad news for both of us. I'm at 77% on my picks. You're at 73. So neither of us hit that 80% threshold. We did get over 75. I got over 75. You're so close to 75. Even if we go undefeated, I don't think we get there. But we did our best, right? We didn't get the 80. Season picks, anyone who knows our Patreon members, I nailed some of my season picks, but I also had some serious flops. So it was pretty mixed this year when it came to season picks. And obviously going important, ND, Justin, we're about to dive in. We're going to start with the Friday games. That's a good point. We're going to start with the Friday games breakdown, then go to Saturday. But when we talk, Mars, about football, we don't talk about the weather a lot, right? But weather's going to be such an important. We get into November, you're actually going to have pretty decent weather here for football, because I know when it gets windy, it's rainy, it does change the game. Both Friday and Saturday, it's going to be nippy, right? A low of 33, a low of 38, but no rain. Slight breeze, not too big, with some gusts here and there, but it's going to be relatively good weather for football. So there's I got my weatherman jacket on, so I'll give you those little weather updates for you guys. Mars, any final thoughts about season record? And let's dive into these games, man.
Yeah, I will say I do wish we got the official records comparing us to
the other guys. I don't know, yeah.
Or, because I felt like we were pretty much on point there. And I got to give you credit. You picked guys like Ardsley and Pleasantville at the start of the season.
I did.
You were dead on, but then you doubted yourself, and I followed your advice, and I was right on my games to the point where Ardsley's thanking me for having faith in them.
I know. I picked you guys in August, and they're ragging on me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's at the end of the day, we've always been in Section 1, so we just have this feeling of that we know these classes, the extensive amount of research and work that goes into it. I mean, it's a lot. Right?
It's a lot.
And I feel like it's been a great season, and that's why we're here to close out the year on a good note.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's dive into the games. We gave our soap opera talks, and again, any questions you guys, throw it into the chat. First one up, and I also want to give a real shout out to G Harris 2K on IG. Give him a follow for some of the visuals that you're going to see here. He has done a really good job. He usually just did AA, but then he started doing A, and then some of the other leagues. So I give him a lot of credit, and I just want to give him a shout out. Follow him on Instagram if you guys like some of these Section 1 visuals. I think it's great. So I appreciate him giving me the okay to use them on the show. So let's start with the first game, and we're going to go Friday to Saturday, and the first game up on Friday is the D matchup, which is Tucko 5-3 versus Haldane, who is 4-4. And these two teams played in week 3, where Tucko won 12-6, and it was a rainy and ugly game that night. There was not a great weather game to pass the ball. But when you look between these two teams, historically, I mean, this is the big rivalry game between them. They've played 31 times since 2004. Tucko is 24-6-1 in these last 31 matchups. And so, let's start with Tucko. And, they're entering the section title game pretty damn hot. They're on a 3-game win streak. They've been outscoring their opponents 121-12 in that span. And offensively, that they are really predicated on the run game. And early in the season, they lost their quarterback, Bryce, at the start of the year, which really changed things. He was such a focal point going into the season, so they really had to adjust things. But he may be on his way back in this game. So that's going to be a huge boost for them, another weapon to run the ball. But this offense has really been, since his injury, about this offensive line being extremely physical, moving people at the point of attack. They have solid size for a really small school. And, their backs combined have led to close to a total of 1,900 yards rushing this season. And the duo of Connolly and Baghetti, who combined for 205 yards their last game and 7 touchdowns in the last 2 games, have been a huge part of that offense. They have been a real dynamic duo between them. Now, the last time they played Haldane, Mars, offensively, they only passed the ball 4 times. Right? I mentioned it was an ugly game. They had 253 yards rushing. 225 yards rushing, 253 yards total. Right? So they rushed for over 200 yards. They didn't have to pass a lot. They had over 5 yards a carry. So that's the key to them. Running the football, being efficient running the football. really showed that efficiency in the second half of that Haldane game, and they had no turnovers, which that was huge for them. And that's the big key on offense. Stay ahead of the chains. If they're going to win on offense, it's staying ahead of the chains. Got to start fast because you don't want to get down because you're not really a passing team, right? You're looking to run the football. So don't get down. Start off fast. Control the time of possession and play some good defense. That to me is Tucko because when you look at defensively, they haven't given up an offensive touchdown, Mars, in 3 games. The last time they did it, last game they had versus Woodlands, they had 3 sacks and forced 2 turnovers. This is a defense that has been getting better and better. Max Reyes had an INT. Bailey Worsley had a fumble recovery. And this defense is led by guys like Serlo, Gardier, Silvestri. Because last time they played Haldane, they only gave up 130 yards as well. So this has been running the ball, playing good defense, low-scoring games. That, to me, if they can prevent the big play, because Haldane's got a couple studs who can really hit big plays in Thomas and Corliss. So they have multiple guys who can hit big plays on Haldane's side. If they can keep everything in front, force Haldane to be methodical, I like their chances in this one. Mars, thoughts on Tucko?
Yeah, I mean Tucko's rush offense has been so impressive, and I just feel like they really have just been owning the line of scrimmage, and their offensive line you have to give a lot of kudos for. So I feel like they really are going to set the stage for this game.
Yeah, they really are. And now for Haldane, they lost. They're coming in a little bit slower. They've lost 2 of the last 3 games. Now they did have to play Dobbs Ferry and Putt Valley, which are 2 very good teams. And when you look at them offensively, they also like to run the ball. And they like to attack downfield, on their passes. They love to use tempo to try to catch defenses off balance. And I'm expecting to see that again this time around. They have a couple big play guys in their offense, in Corliss and Thomas, who they line up at the wide receiver spot, but they give them on jet sweeps. Sometimes I actually really like when I saw, Corliss brought into the backfield at the quarterback and some of the Wildcat stuff. So again, not sure if that's, something that they can implement going, because I did see some of that. I think that's a really nice wrinkle for their offense. And they also have Gogler, the running back, who's kind of a downhill runner, physical runner. So they have a couple guys who can really make plays for you. But they really want to get Thomas and Corliss in space. That's going to be the big thing because those are their big play guys. Those are the guys who can hit you some big chunk plays. So it's going to be really important for their quarterback and Palace, the young man who can also run a little bit. He's got to be very efficient with the ball, right? And he's got to protect the ball. That's going to be so important. Limit the turnovers here. Get your ball to your playmakers in space. That's going to be so important for them. And this offensive line is young. Coach talked about when I reached out to him how they have gotten better. They've gotten more physical. They started off young and inexperienced. You've seen it at times throughout the year. They've given up a lot of pressure on their quarterback. But that's just a group that's really going to have to step up against a physical Tucko defense because they only had 130 yards last time they played them. And what is it? 2.3 yards a carry. So they struggled to run the ball consistently, and penalties were a big part of it. Way too many penalties that killed drives for them the last time that they played them. So to me, offensively, the key, trying to get those chunk plays, trying to get Corliss and Thomas into that second level of your defense, into some space, trying to, again, doesn't always have to be deep passes, right? Get them on some short routes, let them make guys miss, right? So get them in space, create some of those chunk plays, jet sweeps, and then take some shots, when you have some max protection, because when you're there, when you only have 5 and you don't have a running back staying back there, at times the quarterback can feel a lot of pressure, and that's where the mistakes come. So, I'm going to be interested to see how they attack it. Would love to see some Corliss Wildcat in the backfield stuff. They're going to see some tempo. So they could catch their defense off balance if they can start moving the ball a little bit, creating some chunk plays, moving around some of their stars. Defensively, they've had some high moments defensively this year and some not so high moments. I mean, you have guys like Stickle and Phillips, Gogler have been really impressive for them. And secondary is pretty strong with Corliss, Fay, and Thomas, and some others. But, if they could slow down the Tucko run game and force them to be a passing team, this is a Haldane secondary that can make you pay, right? They can play some man coverage. You're going to get a lot of man coverage versus Tucko because they got to load the box. But this is a group, they gave up over 5 yards a carry last time they played them. They need to be able to slow the running game down. That is where Tucko's bread and butter is. Not just that, because they can control the time possession as well. So Haldane really needs to get them behind the chains, force them to be a passing team, especially if Bryce is playing. That's another playmaker in the run game. Expect to see a lot of loaded boxes in this one, Mars. Thoughts on Haldane?
Yeah, I feel like Haldane, obviously, they struggled to close out the season on the positive note, but I mean, they have some playmakers. They have some guys that can make some big moments, and I feel like they on defensive side can be really tough. They can be really gritty. I just feel like it really is going to depend on their ability to limit the run for Tucko in order for them to kind of be, I guess you'd say, slow down the game and pacing so that they're not making big plays.
Football Cute's brother, who made the graphic, that is G Harris 2K on Instagram. I believe that is George Harris is his name, but give him a follow on Instagram. He does a pretty damn good job with some of these visuals. So that's who made it. So a shout out to him. All right, Mars, who is your matchup? We call this the Mars matchup to watch. Mars, what is your matchup for this D championship game? And then we'll go to some film and then the game pick.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to my matchup, I think the biggest thing I'm looking at is the Tucko offensive line versus Haldane's defensive front. And the Tucko Hogs are definitely going to be tested this week against Haldane, especially when they're going to basically load the box and trying to attempt them to cause some mayhem and own the trenches. They're going to try to get Tucko to be a passing team. Tucko's offensive line has proven to be one of the best offensive lines in this Class C and D, and they've proven it by basically allowing to run the ball for nearly 2,000 yards. And they've led the charge this entire season. But the big question I have is for specifically this matchup is going to be on whether Haldane will be able to slow down this offensive line. Because there were times that they had some really great moments on defense, but then sometimes they just struggled, right?
Yeah.
But as long as they are disciplined, they don't fly up the field, what allows Tucko's offense to cut them up and really just stick to their rules and their gaps, and they just play tough. That's going to be what I think is a defining moment in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. And for the film, I'm going to take a look at Tucko's defense versus Haldane's offense. So let me pull up the film for our first film session. Give me 1 minute, guys. There we go. You guys can see everything. Cool.
Yep.
All right, yeah, first thing I want to talk about is this Tucko defense. And, this is them versus Haldane the first time. And Tucko did a really good job. Again, I mentioned less than 2.5 yards a carry in the run game. And they did a good job of creating a lot of penetration. And you could see, Haldane lining up with a tight end wing down here with two receivers backside. They're going to run to this tight end wing. And Tucko's ability to create penetration up front caused a lot of disruptions last time. And look for them to try to do that again this time. Because, you see, Tucko came with 5 men on the line of scrimmage. Right, they have 5 men here. They got 8 guys in the box with this tight end wing. They're looking to slow down the run game, right? That's going to be the key thing, especially on early downs. And this defensive line gets off the ball very quickly. So they're going to run to this tight end wing. You're going to see they're going to try to do a bunch of down blocks. They're going to pull some linemen. But watch the starts that some of these guys get on this defensive line, especially play side, right? Look at the start right there. Shoots off that line, beats that down block inside, and he actually makes contact with the pulling guard. And that's so important because that pulling guard needed to kick out this defensive end. Because of that penetration, really disrupts the timing of the guard pulling. And now that D end, forcing the running back in, he's got a clean shot at the back. And look at the rallying backside. This is what Tucko has been doing, did real well versus Haldane last time, and has been doing really well these past couple weeks. Is they are really doing a good job of stopping the run, slowing down the run, and rallying to the ball. And here's another example of that. Again, I mentioned Haldane's got playmakers. They got some speedy guys who can hit some big plays against you. Now Haldane goes into the spread, right? They want to loosen the box a little bit. So they go into the spread 2 by 2, and I'm going to highlight this young man, Thomas, who's one of their big playmakers. Fast kid. He gets into space. He's hard to stop. And they want to get him the ball, right? They're going to run a jet sweep right here. Use the running back to attack that defensive end and really attack the edge of this defense. But again, Tucko did a really good job. They see the motion. They're actually going to send their linebacker on a stunt, look like an automatic, predetermined. Once that guy goes in motion, you're going to go. But watch the contain. So the linebacker does a good job coming inside out to slow down Thomas. But watch these guys out on the edge, making guys miss. Look at them swarm to the ball here. And again, a jet sweep going for half a yard or 1 yard, helped by that inside linebacker slowing down. But look at the contain coming up. Now, if Tucko can stop them, get him into 2nd and 3rd and long, Haldane has to go into this, again, to pass the ball, which allows their front to create some pressure. And you got guys like Thomas and Corliss who are really tough to guard against, so your secondary can't be covering them all day. They're going to run zone coverage to those guys. Right? They're going to run zone coverage here, and is really relying on this defensive front to attack the quarterback. They need these guys to generate pressure without sending blitzes. And so you're going to see an example of that. Watch the get off by this defensive line. Here's the combination route. Again, up the field, they're trying to draw these defenders, these zone guys, run them off, and then throw something underneath to Thomas. So it's going to take a little time, but look how fast that defensive lineman. Great move out there. Look at the penetration inside. Forces the quarterback to step up into the pocket where the rest of the D-line cleans them up. Again, Tucko's defensive front, very good at penetrating. Did a good job versus Haldane last time. They're going to have to duplicate that again this time around. Now going to Haldane. I mean, again, I mentioned they got a bunch of playmakers, and what could help when the pass rush is getting too great, like what Tucko showed last time, is, hey, get your quarterback out on the edge. Go into the quick game. Go into the short game. Get these playmakers out in space. And, you've seen that from Haldane this year. Here's an example of it. Here's Thomas in the slot. Right? And I mentioned the previous play, kind of these downfield throws take some time to develop. This one's quicker. A quick sprint out. Get Thomas into the flat. Right? Get your playmaker the ball quickly. Get your quarterback out of the pocket so he's not rushed. And you can see that right there. There's a nice easy read. The corner's back turn on the number 2 receiver. Thomas is in the flat, wide open. Get him the ball. And then watch these playmakers make plays. Makes a couple guys miss. You see the speed. See you later. Another thing I really like, saw this in a wrinkle, and again, don't know if this will be implemented, but I liked watching it, is you throw Corliss into the backfield. Do some wildcat. Here he is right there. You got Thomas in the slot. That puts a lot of pressure on your defense. And because Thomas is the number 3 receiver, it's not a hard throw to throw it to him, even if you have a wildcat quarterback. But they're just going to run some zone read with him. Corliss is an athletic guy, an explosive guy. They're going to run zone read with the quarterback. They're going to see zone blocking up front. They're going to watch his defensive end, see if he crashes. Look at it again. Nice read right here. Look at everyone crash down. And Corliss is going to pull it. Nice fake, one-on-one with the corner. Leads to a huge chunk play that ends up being a touchdown. These are the kind of things that I think Haldane, can do to put some pressure on this Tucko defense that has a front that, hey, you come out with a tight end, you're going to see a 5-man front. You come out in the spread, you'll see a 4-man front, but they're coming aggressively. This defensive line can create a lot of penetration. All right, Morris, Class D champion. Who do you got and why?
So, when I'm looking at this game, I think what's always interesting is that these guys are always battling at the end of the year. They know we're going to the section final. It's going to be mano-a-mano, rivalry game for the 3rd time. And here we are, right? And they've been playing each other for so long. It feels like I really don't know what else they could throw at each other at this point.
Yeah.
But I feel like when you look at the momentum of this game, and I feel like that's always such a pivotal point when it comes to how football games go, right? When you are on a roll and you're chugging along, I feel like that really carries you into each and every game, right? If you struggle games in a row, it feels like it's like a weight on your shoulders that you have to get off. And obviously, last year, Haldane had their way, and they had their wins, and they were riding that momentum. And I feel like this time, Tuckahoe is that team that is gaining that momentum going into the end of the season. And I just feel like what they do best is run the ball and move bodies around with their offensive line. And I feel like that's going to be what the driving force for this game. And I'm going to go with Tuckahoe to win the section championship for Class D, because I feel like their offensive line has been the cogs of this machine. And I just don't see any kinks in that. I feel like Haldane has to really try to find a way to cause them to slow down, but they haven't been able to do so. Not many teams have been able to do so far. But because, like I said before, their rush offense has been very impressive. If Haldane can force them to throw more, then that may be different. But I don't think they will be able to. I'm going to go with Tuckahoe.
Listen, I think Haldane's a very well-coached team. I think they're a gritty team and have some, to me, they have the star power to win this game, and guys like Thomas and Corliss and Faye on defense. But I am going to go with Tucko as well. I feel like Tucko can win in the trenches, and that's going to be the most important thing in this one. They have played really well defensively. I mentioned they're not giving up points, and this rush offense, especially if they're getting Bryce back, adds another weapon for that rush attack that is very explosive. Multiple guys can run the ball, I mentioned. So I am going to go with Tucko as well. All right, next up, probably one of the big matchup everyone has been looking forward to, and that is the A matchup between the 10-0 Rye versus 10-0 Somers. People have been kind of circling this as a potential matchup from the start of the season. And now here we are. And when you look at historically, these teams did not play this year. Somers is 8-5 versus Rye since 2004, and they have won 3 straight against Rye. And the last time they played was in the 2022 championship, where Somers obviously won. But let's start with Rye. And, their pathway here is, they won 34-14 versus Brewster in the quarters. Then they won 35-14 versus Yorktown in the semis. Coach Gar also became the most winningest coach in Section 1 history, so congratulations to Coach there. But, they have been a dominant force going through the playoffs and into this game. And offensively, we'll start there. We know anyone who's watched the show talking about Rye, they are a very potent offense, and they can beat you running the ball and throwing the ball. And you'll see some spread. You'll see some 1 tight end looks, 2 tight end looks, fullbacks. They'll throw a variety of different things at you. But over the last 3 games, what has really dictated things is the guys up front. This offensive line has been pretty good all year, but the last 3 games you've really seen this offensive line, fullbacks, tight ends, really control the line of scrimmage, and their running game has been sensational. Running backs Giuliano and Ramachandran, and even quarterback Miller running the ball has been dominant. And we know about, they'll do some wide receiver runs with Fenton and stuff as well. But they have run the ball for over 200 yards marks in 3 straight games. And that's against a Brewster defense, a Harrison defense. I know Yorktown has struggled against the run, but you're running against some good defenses as well. It's not just, bad teams that they're running against. So running the ball extremely well, over 200 yards in 3 straight games. And listen to the pass attempts over the last 3 games. 30 against Harrison, then it was 17, then it was 10. Right? That they're reducing the amount of pass attempts because they're controlling things up front and becoming a more balanced offense. They're going to run power run football. They'll do some wildcat with you, Mars. You know about that. And keep this in mind. Somers struggled a little bit last week against some power running by Harrison. So definitely look for Rye to get heavily involved with that with their 2 backs and even quarterback Miller. And Miller was super efficient. Didn't ask to throw a lot, but he was 8 for 10, 101 yards and 2 touchdowns. But the turnovers going down, right? Because they're not throwing it as much, they're not making as many mistakes throwing it. And I think that's going to be huge because their play action game with their wide receivers in Schumacher, Fenton, Hess, Kesner, and this rush attack is super, super deadly. It is very hard to stop, puts a lot of pressure on your defense. Once they go running the football, play action, pass out of these condensed formations, it's really tough. And that's, to me, the key. They have to be balanced. Right? I think you test them power running the football, play action out of that early. And again, if then you're going to get these super heavy boxes, you can start sprinkling in the spread stuff. But I do think you got to test them, Somers, stopping the run, number 1. And then you get these kind of press man coverage. That's when you start taking those shots down the field to some of your big targets who are hard to cover man to man. Those are kind of the big things offensively. Defensively, this group has forced 8 turnovers, Mars, in the last 3 games. And they like to get ahead of you, by pounding the rock, getting ahead of you, throwing the ball, hitting some big passes down the field. And now this defense can mix things up with their rush packages, rushing 4, rushing 5, coming off the edge, coming internally, and also coverages. They've done a really solid job, especially against Yorktown. They were mixing up some coverages, trying to take away the quarterback's first read, and then this defensive line closing down and creating some pressure, forcing those turnovers. So, the issue versus Somers, I mentioned the 3 Musketeers. It's hard to take everything. You can't take everything away. But what you have to force Somers to do is be methodical, right? Don't give up the big play to Palazzolo. That's going to be something Rye is going to try to bracket and has to be aware of because they move Palazzolo around. You have to have checks no matter where he is on the field. That is obviously going to be so important for them. It's going to be so important. And you have guys up front like McGuire and Sala, Kesner, Wilmarth, who are going to have to defend the run at times with guys bracketed out to Palazzolo. That's going to be the key because Kelly's a stud. This offensive line can really hurt you. But it's going to be so important for this secondary to keep everything in front and force Somers to be methodical going down the field. Thoughts on Rye, Mars?
Yeah, Rye has been extremely impressive. And I feel like the last few weeks, they've just really solidified their offensive efficiency, right? And I feel like, yes, there are times where they might be a little slower, but I feel like between Rye and Somers, I've seen Rye be more consistent when it comes to their play the entirety of games, right? Not saying Somers isn't. I don't want the Somers Tuskers account to go after me. Mainly in the first half of the season, Somers kind of slowed up, right? They started really slow and then they started to grow into them dominating a team. This offense for Rye has just been consistent. They've just been dominant throughout the entirety. Sure, there are times where maybe the first half was close, and then they kind of just pulled away at the end. Like against Yorktown, you saw the first time they played each other. I mean, it was like it was a close game throughout, and only until the fourth quarter did you really see that change really explode, right? But for the most part, Rye kind of has they've controlled these games, and there really wasn't an inkling of fear or anything like that. You know what I mean? So very interesting for this offense and how they're going to go against the Somers defense.
Yeah, defensively, they also have one of the better secondaries in Fenton, Strazzini, Schumacher, Denver, and Giuliano back there. Lewis, I know, had a couple of INTs at some point. They have multiple guys who they filter around that give them a lot of the ability to disguise things, which I think are going to be super important in this one. But they have to bracket Palazzolo. That's as good as the secondary is, they can't go one-on-one. It can't happen. I think it can't happen. Maybe they prove me wrong. But let's go to Somers. And, for them, they had a super impressive quarter win, 34-0 versus Clarkstown South. They were dominant. Then versus Harrison, they win 14-6. And they had to make some key plays in the second half offensively to get back into it. Defensively, struggled in the first half getting off the field. Harrison ran the ball on them pretty well. Second half, they definitely got better. Fourth quarter, they got really good, right? So, again, defensively, it was a bit of a struggle for a while. And, again, you give up one touchdown, you say it's a struggle. But they couldn't get off the field to give their offense more opportunities, was the key thing. And offensively, week after week, we talk about this group, the three Musketeers, Iglesias, Kelly, and Palazzolo. They are a dominant force. As dominant of a trio as we have seen in years past in Section 1. They account for well over 70% of the touchdowns, 75, I think, over that in this offense. But there's other guys who can make plays for you. And we've seen that over the last few weeks. And that's made Somers, as a dominant offense, to an exceptionally dominant offense. And Violante, Whipple, Kelly, they've become a threat at the wide receiver spot. And this offensive line really executes very well. They have depth, but they do a really good job of moving guys at the point of attack. That's the key to them. And they also pull pretty damn well. They do a lot of counters. They like to pull the linemen, and they do a really good job. But what I really liked in that second half, when things looked dire, right, they got creative with Palazzolo, right? They moved him around. They shifted him into the backfield, motioning him into the backfield. They're forcing defenses to try to adjust, try to create some confusion, mess with their eyes. And I think that was so important. He really sparked things in that second half for this offense and changed the momentum of the game on a couple plays, which I am going to go film on. But he was such a difference maker. He's one of the most electric players in the section, no question. But you have Iglesias, who made a really nice throw on fourth down for him, and then Kelly finishing the deal for the second touchdown. I believe it was Kelly on that second touchdown to get them ahead. So, it's so hard to stop this big three. And for them, if they play their game, keep the chains going, right? Take what the defense gives you. At some point you're going to get those one-on-one opportunities, and you take advantage of that. Against Rye, you're going to see some different things. So I know the coaches using some of those shifts and motions can help reveal what a defense is doing. So expect to see that watching Somers this week. But I do think it could be a strong Kelly Iglesias running game. I know, again, Rye does a good job of disguising coverage. They're going to try to bracket Palazzolo. It could open up opportunities running the football with Kelly and Iglesias. So keep that in mind. Defensively, second half of the year, they were really great against the run. Last week was a bit of a struggle, but they were really good in the fourth quarter. So, which run defense are we going to see? I think you're going to see closer to what you've seen most of the year, which has been a pretty darn good, strong run defense. And they're going to have to be, because last week they got to a lot of third and shorts and couldn't convert on them because they were losing the early downs. So expect them. They got to be more aggressive on early downs, especially when you get these condensed formations, to try to generate negative plays versus Rye. And it's led by their defensive lineman in Harris, who, he had a fumble recovery last week. They've only allowed 1 touchdown the last 3 games for Somers. So this defense has been a really strong unit. Against Rye, you have to slow down this power running game and keep Miller in the pocket. It's hard. They play their defense the way they're going to play some press man against these receivers, which is a bit dangerous to me. But if they can generate pressure and keep Miller in the pocket, that's where I've seen more of the mistakes Miller makes, is when he's trying to get outside and then he starts to scramble and forces something that isn't there, right? So if you can get him, take away that first read from him, force him to stay in the pocket, don't let him use his legs, that's where you might get some opportunities. Thoughts on Somers, Mars?
Yeah, I mean, Somers has, it feels like they've only gotten better as the season went on, which is hard to believe, right? But they've really just settled into themselves, especially in the second half of the season. And, yes, I mentioned before that they've had more closer games than Rye, but in the victories that they've had, they ran them out of town, right? And I feel like this offensive line really has set the stage for Somers throughout the year. But like you said, there's a lot of talent that just shows up and they do what they have to do, and they've been scoring touchdowns at will at times. So obviously, it's going to be really consistent with this offensive line. This front, the defensive front as well, has to win up front.
Yeah. Mars, let us know, what is the Mars matchup of this game going to be?
Well, when it comes to my matchup, I'm looking at Somers pass attack versus Rye's secondary, and Miguel Iglesias has dominated the season being on par with guys like Gonzalez of Yorktown and Boo Miller of Rye, and when it comes to his ability to make big plays when they need him to. And they've been playing against top-level defenses like we saw against Yorktown in the beginning of the season and last week against Harrison, and they've sometimes struggled, right? But he has gone against top-level talent and has been playing well. Now, sometimes when we do see him play against these top-level defenses, there have been times for getting targets to guys like Palazzolo, Volante, Whipple, Kelly. They have been limited, right? And that does cause the offense to struggle. And now you're playing against probably the best secondary in Class A in Rye, and they are a top level. And the big question I'm asking is whether we will see the same performance that we saw against teams like Mayapack that were, domination, or is it going to be more of a battle like they had against Harrison? I think the offense is going to run through this pass offense. I know that running the ball is Somers' main goal, but if they can establish the run a little bit to allow the pass to open up, I think there might be chances for big shots down the field. But as a defense, Rye has become a turnover machine, racking up at least roughly around 3 turnovers a game, almost feels like. I know the last 3 games they've had 8. But it feels like 3 per game seems like the average. And I feel like for their secondary, if they can force mistakes to happen on this offense and they'll capitalize it, they'll get their offense back on the field, and that's where that run game is really going to step up. Against Yorktown, the defense struggled to win on 3rd down, but they will be tested. And you call them the 3 Musketeers, they will test you, right? It's going to be a question of who's going to show up. Is it going to be a pure domination, or is it going to be a battle, which I'm expecting it to be?
Yeah. Well, for the film, let's talk about that Somers pass attack. Some of the things that, the Somers pass attack and some of the innovation they did in the run game and, and versus this Rye rush attack that's been so dominant. So I'm going to start, let me pull up the huddle here. I'm going to start with Rye because that's the first team that we talked about. And I want to talk about that rush game. We talked multiple weeks about, Boo Miller, this pass attack, play action game. But let's talk about the run game, which has been such a dominant force. I mentioned over 200 yards the last 3 games, and it hasn't been complicated. I mean, they're coming out in these condensed formations and running it right at defenses. And you're going to see here, they got 2 tight ends, they got 3 backs. I mean, when you get something like this, look at how many defenders they have. They got 2, 4, 6 guys on the line of scrimmage. You got 9 guys within 4 yards of the ball. Right? But even with these condensed formations, if you win your one-on-one battles, you create some push at the point of attack, you could still run it. And, you're just going to see a bunch of drive blocks. And I like on this, where they're running the ball, you're going to see a center and guard do kind of an exchange block, where the center is going to down block, and then this guard is going to do a short pull up to the backer. And they give Juliano the option, hey, you find open space, you hit it, wherever it is. Right? So he's going to attack the center, but he can bend it in any direction here. Now, they give him like an area to run, but he's got very good vision, and he uses that vision to find open holes. And you can see that right here. The guard's doing a short pull, which I believe that's the initial read for Juliano, but he sees right up the gut Look at the job that they do on the backside here, sealing off these defenders. He sees that open up on the backside once the linebacker steps in one direction, and he hits the hole hard. Right? He sees it, takes one cut. Look at him explode through that hole right there to the second level. He's got really good vision. He hits the hole hard, and he's not a small guy. He's hard to bring down in the open field. So you get Giuliano back, and it really has opened things up for this offense. Ramachandran's also a very good, combo back with him, but Giuliano really is the star, bringing it back here, creates an even more dynamic running game. And then we go to another play, and again, nothing strange here. You're going to see, again, the ride comes out in two tight ends, but this time with two flankers. And because the play-action game has been so good for Rye this year, defenses have to respect it. So you got two tight ends, two flankers. You still have two high safeties here. Now, they got 5 men on the line of scrimmage, but two high safeties because you have to be wary of the play-action game from Rye, even with these condensed formations. But because you have these two high safeties and you got really 7 in the box, you can run against these fronts, even though they got 5 men on the line of scrimmage. And here you go again, right? A lot of drive blocks. You're going to get a little exchange block from one of the guards. And you can say, hey, Giuliano, find the hole for yourself, right? So he hands it here. They do a really good job, again, creating seal. But the defensive line really anchors down here. You don't get the same movement that we saw on the previous play, right? But this is where Giuliano is a special cat, right? They anchor down really well. The hole's not really there. Look at them run through that hole. And now the linemen still moving their feet, still staying on blocks. I mean, he makes 4 guys. He runs through contact through 4 guys, and this leads to a long touchdown. Again, it felt like at best was about 3 yards, but he turns it into a long touchdown because he keeps driving his feet. He's got really good vision. And this offensive line, even though that initial hole wasn't there, continues driving guys, moving people at the point of attack. It's been very impressive to watch. Now I want to go to Somers, and they have been the number 1 offense in A, really led by the 3 Musketeers, but some of these other guys have really stepped up. This offensive line, some of these other receivers. But I like that even when they were struggling last week, didn't get a ton of possessions, they got creative. And here's some examples of that. First, let's talk about a pass play. And again, Palazzolo, who I want to keep in mind, they got trips to the left, a single receiver to the right. And the 2 guys I have highlighted, the single receiver is actually their running back, Kelly. And the guy in the backfield is Palazzolo, not normally there. So what they're trying to do is create some confusion on the defense. And I actually think Harrison plays this pretty good. Right? They see trips to the left. They see one receiver. So they're going to get the safety towards the trip side. Right? But now Somers is shifting. Right? Somers is shifting, and Palazzolo is now going to the wide receiver spot to the right. Which is really, if you think about it, just creating an empty play. Normally, you would see a wide receiver be flanker to the right, running back as the second receiver. But they're trying to create some confusion amongst the defense and to create some matchups. Harrison actually does this pretty well. They shift here. Now the safety comes over to Palazzolo's side. Makes a lot of sense here. So schematically, Harrison lined up pretty good. But the problem is, even when you line up well, when you got the 3 Musketeers, they could still find a way to make plays. And here's the route combination. They're going to run a stop inside and a go route. This is on 4th down. The play that practically saved Somers' playoff season. And you can see Harrison playing it pretty well. Now the safety is a little hesitant, and that's the mistake. But Palazzolo got his hands up. He looks covered right here. But the trust between Iglesias and Palazzolo, the ball placement, and the ability to make big plays. Watch this right here. The safety, this is a bang-bang play. He knows he's going to get hit. He's going to get hit hard. But he hangs on to it. Gets absolutely wrecked. Touchdown. Really well executed. Even when they're trying to do something creative, Harrison adjusted well. But Somers still executed with their star players. The last play I want to get to is, again, another nice little innovative wrinkle that they have. Again, you're going to get trips to the right. Palazzolo is going to be the number 2 receiver. Right? So again, Harrison does something smart. They're going to put someone up in front of him to try to impede him if he's going out for a pass. Right? You got 2 guys playing off. You got a defender right in front of them. But they're going to motion him into the backfield. And as they motion him into the backfield, they're actually going to counter him back and hand him the ball. Kelly's going to go in the opposite direction. And you can see a couple linemen pulling. They're trying to mess with these linebackers, mess with these defenders. And you can see it works. One of the linebackers stepping into the wrong direction because he's following Kelly. The linemen pull back. Really good job at the point of attack. Look at the movement that this offensive line gets. Nice kick out block. Palazzolo's got the ball at the second level. Very well executed. The offensive line, the shift, and now Palazzolo. You get him in space. This was a huge play to get them an opportunity to score a touchdown. And it's these plays when the offense is still having a rough moment where the Three Musketeers can still wreck a game against the defense. All right, Mars. Big game. Who do you got winning and why?
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the, in my opinion, probably the biggest game of the section, because you really don't get to see this often in history, where the two defending state champions are playing against each other in Class B and Class.
Well, not state champ, two section champs.
Two section champs.
Yeah, one in B, one in A.
Yeah. So you have these section champions that are playing against each other, and now this was the matchup that everyone wanted to see last year, right? That was the thing that everyone wanted to see last year as well. But when Rye obviously went down, it caused a whole mayhem to happen, and so now that we finally get to see it. And I feel like when it comes to this matchup, unfortunately, we didn't get to see them play during the season, so it's really hard to get a real test to see how these teams would match up against one another. You get to see some obviously teams they played against during the season play against others like Harrison, Yorktown, but that's not really the real thing. When you get to the section championship, that's where you get to see the real, everything is out there, right? So Somers has been impressive with the Three Musketeers, and they have been really dominating teams, especially when they start getting on their groove. And their defense has been very good. Their front seven has really slowed down teams, and they just get their guys more opportunities when they get on the field. Rye secondary is scary, right? They really can lock down teams, and they really win the turnover battle on a daily basis. And their offensive capabilities are, I feel like, simple, yet just fancy. I feel like Boo Miller has exploded. He is coming onto the scene, and I keep saying this every week, but he's having Madden numbers, and it's really impressive when you have guys like him along with guys like Luliano who really are forces, but also a lot of other guys as well. But this is a tough one for me, but I think I'm going to go with Rye, and I feel like Rye has, they have more consistency. I feel like their defense has more big playability. I feel like they get more turnovers overall. I feel like the turnover battle, and not a lot of people think about this, but turnovers really do make a big difference in high school football. And when you are a team that just finds ways to get the ball in your hand when you're on defense, I mean, that changes everything, right? Not saying that Somers doesn't, but Rye has the turnover bug. They find ways to get the ball in their hands and force teams to turn the ball over. And I feel like they're going to get a few of those in the direction for Rye. And I feel like they're going to win the turnover battle. I think Boo Miller is going to have some really impressive game. But I think Luliano is going to be the one that really drives this forward. I'm going to go with Rye.
This is a very hard one because a lot of people are picking Rye. And, Somers has been, and I've said this before, they've been the Godzilla of Class A, where, they have kind of been the monster that has dominated all the other monsters. And then no one seems to really can take them down, even when there's at times they felt like, hey, they have an even matchup here. But the veteran coaching that have been in this moment and the veteran players who continue to make big plays in big moments, it is hard to go against them. With that said, I agree. I think Rye is going to win this game. I just love their consistency that they have played on both sides of the ball. And Somers has been so dominant offensively. Defensively, I really, they have really improved as the season gone along defensively. The question I have is last week a blimp on the radar defending the run, or is there something there that if you can run with some physicality and downhill, you can have some opportunities to beat this Somers team? So to me, I think Rye does enough. I think it's going to be a close game, back and forth game. I think Somers takes the lead early. Rye probably takes the win late. And I think this is going to be a really entertaining matchup, but I am going to go with Rye to win. And did they both win state? I thought.
No, I felt pretty sure they did.
Yeah, I'm having like a brain fart. I thought Somers went to A and lost.
Right. I was completely right.
You're probably right. Yeah, you know what? Maybe it's my brain fart, guys. I know they both went, but I'm just trying to remember. And I think Somers did, and actually
Yeah,
win.
they were the state.
It feels like a decade ago. I don't even know. But you might be right, George.
When I was saying it, I was like, man, am I thinking 2 years ago that
It could be me.
But
It could be me, guys.
but I was like, I know for sure Rye did. Rye
Yeah.
was a state, but
I know Somers was there. I just try like, did Somers lose or win? I don't.
Yeah,
I'm having a brain fart right now.
See, George knows it. I was right here. So.
George, yeah, Mars was right. Thank you, George. But let's go to the next game, Mars, and that is the C matchup. And that is Valhalla 7-0 versus Dobbs Ferry, who is 6-3. And these two teams played each other week 6, where Valhalla won 35-7. Historically, Dobbs Ferry, this is a big rivalry game. Dobbs Ferry is 13-5 versus Valhalla, but Valhalla has beaten them in 2 straight. So, there could be some history here because, Valhalla on a 2-game win streak versus Dobbs Ferry has only happened one other time since 2004. And it has never happened in 3 straight times. So if Valhalla wins, they have not been on a 3-game win streak versus Dobbs Ferry since before Max Preps was out. So think about that as we go into this game. But let's start with Valhalla. I mean, they have been so dominant all year. Last week's game was canceled, so they had an automatic move into the section finals. But they have been a dominant force, and offensively, a really dominant rush attack, in their wing T football being kind of its main bread and butter. And, they're led by their fullback in Foyset, who's had 7 touchdowns the last 2 games. Just a powerful runner, hard to bring down by one guy. Really have to gang tackle him. But they also have some of these big play guys in Ratty and Bergie. And, I was naming them as the season went along, like Earth, Wind, and Fire. But then they had this young man in Mullard, who has really been a force in the second half of the year, who's created a lot of big plays for them. So they've really went from 3 guys who make huge plays to 4 guys. It's like the Fantastic Four at this point. So I have to include Mullard in this. And then they have their quarterback, McGinty, who they haven't asked to throw a lot, but he's been very efficient and hasn't turned the ball over much, which has been so important for this offense, who has just been dominating things up front. This offensive line deserves a lot of credit. They are moving dudes. And last time they played Dobbs Ferry, Mars, they rushed for over 300 yards. I mean, they got whatever they wanted versus this Dobbs Ferry defense. Now, things have changed. Obviously, you go into another game, played them before. But when you put on what Valhalla was doing to them, they were dominating up front. They were winning, running the ball off tackle. Cutbacks were open, and on the outside, they were really hitting huge, huge plays. Expect them to test that again in this one. If you're going to try to bail out to stop Foyset inside, these counters, these outside runs that Valhalla has with these big playmakers were really, really tough on Dobbs Ferry. Defensively, there's also been a strong group. They were number 1 in points allowed in the CD group. Cavallo has been a force on defense. He can really get after the quarterback. Multiple sack games. Last time they played Dobbs Ferry, they did give up over 150 yards rushing, which is what Dobbs Ferry does very well, but less than 100 yards passing. Right? So they took away one aspect of the game. Right? They took away the play action game from Dobbs Ferry, which only had, I think, was like 70 yards or 60 yards and an INT. So if they can prevent those big pass plays and just limit the big rush plays, Dobbs Ferry wants to run the ball. Again, just don't give up those long runs. Don't give up those huge play action passes. See if your defensive front 7 can match up versus this Dobbs Ferry offensive line, which it did pretty well last time. Thoughts, Mars, on Valhalla?
Yeah, but they've been just dominant this season. I feel like they were a team that we knew had talent, but to come onto the scene as they did was surprising. And I don't think a lot of people expected that. But you got to give them credit. They really, they took it over, right?
With a first-year head coach, right? Yeah. So a lot of surprise.
Not a lot of people expected it.
No, they deserve a lot of credit. They deserve the players, coaches. They deserve a lot of credit. Yeah. Now let's go to Dobbs Ferry. And they had that huge upset victory, 54-13 at Putt Valley. And offensively, listen, they dealt with their injuries early. I know Hardnett got banged up, and they had to rely on a guy like Jackson Kearns, who's been so good for them, such a versatile offensive weapon, and O'Connor, who helped carry things. And now their quarterback Hardnett really back into the groove. They rushed for 300 yards last week, and you see a lot of the wing T option stuff from them. But I also like that they sprinkled in some of the spread runs to try to loosen the boxes a little bit and give Hardnett some options, with a lesser box, that he can attack the holes a lot easier. And, he had 133 yards and 2 touchdowns last week. Jackson Kearns had 3 touchdowns, 2 of them rushing, 1 of them passing. O'Connor had 101 yards. I mean, you have 3 backs go over 100 yards for them. Dylan Ravage also had a receiving touchdown. And this offensive line held up very well versus Putt Valley last week. And they did a decent job against Valhalla when you go watch them. Again, they rushed for 150 yards. The issue is they gave up way too many plays defensively. So can they finish drives this time around versus Valhalla is going to be so important for them against a tough defense. And I think a big way that can help is the play-action pass. Right? They didn't get enough of that the first time versus Valhalla. The play-action pass they have to hit on because Valhalla's going to stack the box to try to stop this run game. And also sprinkling in that spread stuff. I do think, you run your wing T offense. I love the twist concepts that they do, kind of like these quarterback twist plays, where it's like these quarterback traps. But, the play action game, a little bit of the spread to get some of these guys out of the box could definitely be helpful in this game. Defensively, a few weeks ago, Mars, we talked about it on the show, versus Valhalla and Putt Valley. They gave up 97 points, right? This was there was something going terribly wrong in the Dobbs Ferry defense. But the last 2 weeks, Mars, they've given up 13 versus Haldane and Putt Valley, the rematch. So this defense has stepped up. Natsia Smith, Bracoli, O'Connor, they got playmakers on there that have really stepped up the last couple weeks. Last time they played Valhalla, it was ugly. There's no question about it. Give them over 300 yards, so many 30-plus yard runs, 20, 15-plus yard plays, just way too many big plays given up. They have to be much better out on the edge. They have to be much better out on the edge. Keep everything in between the tackle box. You're going up against a tough run. You really have to rally to the ball, but you can't break contain as much as they did last time versus Valhalla. That's obviously going to be the huge part in this one. Thoughts on Dobbs Ferry, Mars?
Yeah, I mean, Dobbs Ferry, every time I picked against them, they found ways to
I know.
absolutely dismantle.
You're a jinx.
I used to pick Dobbs Ferry a few times, and they lost the times I picked on them, but whenever I don't, now they find ways to really show out, and I feel like it has been an impressive showing, obviously, throughout the playoffs, and I feel like their defense has really stepped it up. That was their biggest flaw, like I said, and I feel like they really are going to be tested in a big way. It's going to be whether or not they will show the same game they had against Putt Valley, and because if they do, then I feel like this game will be close.
Yeah, I do. Mars, what is your Mars matchup for this game?
Yeah, and when I'm looking at my matchup, I'm going to definitely look at Valhalla's running backs or run game versus Dobbs Ferry's contained players, and that includes the defensive ends, outside linebackers, and corners. Because when you look at Valhalla's outside game, it's just dangerous. They didn't really play well really at all last week because the game got canceled. But throughout the year, they've dominated with their speed, and a lot of their success was being run through a mixture of outside runs with Ratty and Berge, and then it led to their inside game with Facet. And if I butcher anyone's names, please don't hate me. But you call it the Earth, Wind, and Fire, or you want to call it the Holy Trinity, or the Classy Triumph.
Well, now it's the Fantastic Four with Mullard.
Now it's the Fantastic Four with Mullard. And the idea is that they've been dominating the outside run, and they control basically the entire game by then. Well, whenever a team tries to overload the outside, they just go back to the inside. And so they just constantly have that back and forth. But the plan only works if the outside game gets established. The challenge will be on Dobbs Ferry's contained players to really set the edge and try to give their interior really some breathing room, right? Because the idea is if they can really set the edge and they don't take away any of those interior players that have to go and be that contained to help out, then at least then you're going to stifle this plan. And they can break up this consistency of Valhalla's speed, this sacred trio or quadruple it now, then it can cause negative plays and then force Valhalla to have to do things that they don't want to do, which is go into the passing game. And I feel like if that happens, Dobbs Ferry can find a way to get more opportunities in offense, because I'll be honest with you, Valhalla has outscored opponents, based on my math, 299 to 80 throughout this entire year. And that is mainly due to this run game, and it's been unstoppable. So it's going to be a challenge for Dobbs Ferry.
Absolutely. And let's talk film now. And I'm going to look at the Valhalla rush attack versus Dobbs Ferry last time. And this Dobbs Ferry on offense, so some things that they've done, little wrinkles that they can do in this game. So let me pull up that. Give me 1 second, guys. Always got to love tech.
Oh, yeah.
There we go. All right. And again, I want to start with Valhalla. Last time we played Dobbs Ferry, Mars mentioned it. They really had to try to overcompensate in the middle and then on the outside at times. But it wasn't very complex what Valhalla was doing. I mean, you could see on this first one, 2 tight ends, 3 backs. This is a condensed formation, and they're just saying, hey, we're just going to overpower you and run right over you. And they've been doing that all year, and they did it last time versus Dobbs Ferry. So you're going to see the play that they run. They got 9 guys in the box, right? Dobbs Ferry, schematically, they're going into practically a goal line defensive formation here, right? But if you can move people at the point of attack, you can still run against these condensed formations. That's what Valhalla does. You're going to see down blocks here, and really the 2 backs are going to act like the pulling linemen. They're not going to pull linemen. They're going to use these guys as kind of the kick-out block and the lead blocker. So you can see what I want to focus in on is the point of attack. Look at the movement that Valhalla gets right here on these down blocks. They're moving guys out of the box, and then a nice kick-out block by the running back, and you can see they're getting to the second level. Right? This is going to create a lane for some of these backs who they are physical, they are fast, and you get them in the second level like this. Look at these blocks in the second level. They're moving guys at the point of attack, even with 9-man boxes. And you get these guys who are very elusive, leading to these big plays. I mean, the tight ends, the offensive linemen, the fullbacks have done a really good job all year winning their one-on-one matchups. Right? So you can see there's an inside run. And then what Mars brought up, which is absolutely true, which I talked about, the outside game. Right? Here we go, right now they got 2 backs, they got a tight end wing to the right, and you can see Dobbs Ferry trying to compensate by having multiple guys on the side of that tight end wing, trying to take away that strength. Right? And defensively, again, 9 guys within 4 yards of the ball. Right? So they still got a lot of guys in the box, but they're going to run a counter back to the weak side. Right? They're going to have Foyset step one direction and have a back with a pulling guard and tight end going backside. And again, watch these guys execute. The tight end falls, but look at what the guard does here. Really good job of hooking that D end. And that's an issue that Dobbs Ferry really had the last time they played. The guard does a really good job of sealing that first edge defender and now getting their backs a one-on-one with the second edge defender, which is this corner. And if you get these kind of playmakers here looking to make that one guy miss, there's no one there. And so if they're not going to defend that outside and get sealed, look for Valhalla to continue to make these big plays, which they did the first time around. Now I go to Dobbs Ferry. And, their offense has been pretty impressive all year. And what could help against this Valhalla team, which you're going to see loaded boxes on, is the play action game. And it actually worked last week. And you're going to see they're going to motion the back. And this is a normal tight end wing formation with a slot backside. They're going to motion the wing, and they're going to run play action with the fullback. And it's going to be so important. There's their stud quarterback in Hardnett. He's really going to have to be an orchestrator, running the ball in this game with a force and being very smart throwing the football because they're going to have to take some shots out of play action. And what I like about some of these play action is it gets the quarterback involved that he could also run. And that's what the defense has to compensate for. So again, they motion the guy out. He's going to bubble as the safety valve. But this edge defender is, again, hesitating because the quarterback can run. And so he's going to charge the quarterback. Really smart play by Hardnett here. He sees it right away. You don't have a lot of time. Checks it down to the running back. Guys like Jackson Kearns. Guys who can make plays in open field. It's a decisive play, smart throw, and then let these playmakers make plays in space. But you have to be able to win on these play action plays. They didn't do enough of that versus Valhalla the first time. What I also like is there again, went into a little bit of spread at times. Right? 2 receivers to the left, you have a wing to the right, a flanker to the right. And because you got these playmakers and Kearns and stuff like that, they draw a lot of attention to your defense. They're going to get a motion here. You're going to get that running back try to lead the way. It looks like a jet sweep. But Hardnett's going to take it back to the weak side. So here comes the motion. You can see guys shifting over, thinking the sweep's coming. Look at him fake it, keep it inside. Nice block on the play side there, leading to this big play. I love that they're mixed some of the wing tee and spread running game, involving their quarterback, who is, back ready into the groove, and he's been a force. The play action game, the spread game, mixing in with the wing tee rushing offense. They had the playmakers to make plays, Mars. The question is, Can they hit on the same big plays that Valhalla did the last time? All right, Mars. Who do you got winning the C championship and why?
I mean, obviously, when you play a team multiple times, right, it's not easy, right? And I feel like Valhalla has been in that spot where they've been dominating teams. And, and I said this on previous weeks with other teams before, that there may be times where they might overlook an opponent, right? And because of the fact that that happens, because they've beaten them in the past, they've been outscoring teams, like I said, 299 to 80, I believe.
That's crazy. That's a crazy number.
Yeah. They might overlook an opponent, right? But this is a lot of, there's a lot of significance behind this game for Valhalla. For this first year coach of Valhalla, this is obviously the first chance for them to win a section title at this program, and it's been a long time, right, since Valhalla.
A few years, not that long. It hasn't been that long.
Time, but years, right? It's been years since they've been back at it. And I feel like for a lot of people in this town, Valhalla used to be that dominant force, right? That was always winning, right? Back in the old days of when we were younger, they were always winning consistently all the time. But C has been kind of that powder keg of all these different teams that have been winning, right? It's been diversified, right? Between Dobbs Ferry and then Bronxville and then all these others. So I feel like this is that moment that Valhalla wants to kind of reset themselves as being that dominant team, and they've been showing it all year long. Dobbs Ferry, I will say this, that they have to prove that they are better than what the last showing they had against Valhalla was. It was not a close game last time.
No.
Ferry kind of got beat up quite a bit. And they're gonna mark my words and play it for everybody, but I'm gonna go with Valhalla. I'm gonna pick Valhalla to win this game. I think their offense has been extremely aggressive. They're really fast. They've been burning people out on the outsides. Do I think it's going to go as easy as it has been? I don't think it's going to go as easy as it has been the last few games because I think Dobbs Ferry is going to fight with a lot of energy, and they're going to try to slow down the pace on their side. But I just feel like that Valhalla just has too much. I just feel like they have too much speed. Now you're getting the Fantastic Four when everyone was thinking there was only 3 guys now. So I just feel like Valhalla has the gas, right? I feel like they have enough to win this game.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Dobbs Ferry has the pedigree, right? They have the veterans who have been there, done that on the coaching staff, players who have, been brought up seeing all these, Dobbs Ferry teams win before. They have the playoff experience. So I do think it's going to be a much closer game than it was last time, which really was Valhalla kind of dominating right out of the gate. I do think it's going to be close, much closer. But I agree with you. I think Valhalla does have too much. I think they have run the ball really well, and it's multiple guys who can make plays for you running the ball. Now, if they do get down early, that could change things, right? Because they have to pass more, which they haven't been in that situation before. Haven't really been in close game situations either. But I love the way that they play defense. They have been very aggressive, and they've run the ball and controlled the line of scrimmage. And for that, I'm going to go with Valhalla. We're agreeing way too much here. But let's go to the next game, and that is our B matchup. Another really... When have we seen this before? Pleasantville versus Ardsley. So you have 5-4 Ardsley versus 5-4 Pleasantville. They have played each other back in week 3. It felt like a long time ago, where Pleasantville won 14-9. And these are two teams that have been mainstays in B. So not very surprising when you just name the teams. But if you looked at the season, how it started, I don't think anyone really thought, that these two teams were going to find their way back here. Now, I picked them in August, and even I was sweating after the first couple weeks on my pick that these two teams would play each other. But, let's start with Ardsley. And I mentioned they started the season slow. They went 1-3, started at 1-3, and had a massive turnaround. Now, they lost a lot of close games. One-score games, they've been in a lot of one, even the games they've won. But they started the season losing a lot of close games with a lot of devastating last-second mistakes that really cost them games. But they turned things around, and in the playoffs, they had a gauntlet to go through. They won 14-13 at Pearl River in the quarters, and then winning 14-12 at Bronxville in the semis. So another bunch of close games, and this time they're winning it because they're not making the same mistakes. So this team is battle-tested. They are gritty, they're battle-tested, and offensively, listen, we know that they're very predicated on the run game with their running back in Dulcine, who he's a big playmaker running it. They have an offensive line that is a mix of size and physicality, right? Not all of them are huge, but they play with physicality and some toughness to them. And they'll come out with tight formations with a tight end and mix in some spread concepts. I really like the play action that they mix in with some of the quick game that I've seen from their offense as time goes on. And their quarterback, Kaplan, has shown the ability to run. But they have some big playmakers in Francis and Fiore. They have a nice mix of size and speed to this team. But the big turnaround, like I mentioned, those mistakes, earlier on the season, they had a boatload of penalties and a boatload of turnovers. And that's what they have done much better as the season has gone along. And that's why they're winning these close games instead of losing them. I think earlier in the year, they were averaging, 2+ turnovers a game, right? So that's what was killing them. Last time they played Pleasantville, they had a long touchdown run by Dulcine, and they made some nice plays in the passing game, whether it's the quick game or some play action stuff, but they could not finish drives. They could not finish drives, and they ended up having the game-losing turnover that led to a touchdown, right? So, this time around, they're playing much more mistake-free football offensively, and against Pleasantville, who has been tough defensively, they're going to have some opportunities to take some shots down the field. I'm expecting to see Pleasantville bringing some pressure, trying to stop the run game, which will open things up down the field. But if they can get beyond the first level of this defense, we have seen at times Pleasantville give up big touchdown plays, whether it's the run game, whether it's the pass game. You just have to get through that initial defense because they like to bring a lot of pressure. So if you can get through that first level, Ardsley has the speed to hit big plays. So that's going to be a big thing for them offensively. Defensively, this has been a pretty strong unit all year long. You have guys like O'Brien at the linebacker spot, defensive lineman Speckman, Fiore. They have some good DBs, Francis, Spano. Last week when Bronxville brought in a tight end, and had multiple backs, you saw Ardsley respond with some 4-3 looks and then some 5-man looks, and they were messing around with it to try to screw around with the offensive line. You'll see 5-man fronts. You'll see some 4-man fronts. Look for them to continue to do that. But what was really impressive, they were really strong at the point of attack, right? They weren't getting moved a lot from the sides of Bronxville. So that's going to be huge against this Pleasantville defense if they can really anchor down at the point of attack. Because, even when they went to spread, they were anchoring down with 4-man fronts, right? So this defensive line was very impressive. The front seven really got after it in the running game. And that's when, again, this secondary has got some good players forcing some turnovers. They had an INT that set up their second touchdown last week from Spano. And the last time they played Pleasantville, they didn't give up a lot of offensive play. They didn't give up an offensive touchdown, now that I remember it, right? The defense played pretty good versus Pleasantville. They just gave up touchdowns on a pump block and on offense. So if this defense, again, limiting the run game, you're going to get some wildcat from Pleasantville. You have to be able to anchor down at the point of attack, especially from the backside, right? Because Pleasantville has done a really good job they're going to give you a strength, and their running backs have done a good job of cutting back. And the defense have kind of overcompensated, which has opened up lanes in the backside. So, that's going to be really important. Thoughts on Ardsley, Mars?
Yeah, I feel like they're one of the grittiest teams in B. I mean, they've clawed and battled in every game. I haven't seen Ardsley really get destroyed in any facet. I think I called them like the similar trait to my New York Jets of finding ways to lose in those games that.
Well, maybe they could turn it around like Ardsley did.
Well, that's hopefully the Jets. But my whole point of saying that is that in the beginning of the season, they were losing those games by 1 point, 2 points, 3 points, 1 touchdown, and they kept finding ways to lose and making those mistakes that really hurt them. But then the second half of the season, that started to change, right? And I feel like that's really the big difference between Ardsley being that 1-loss team to being a 5-4 win-loss team, right? And I feel like that just shows a testament of I guess the growth. Like they've made less mistakes, but they can't fall into that same rhythm again because that could be a big problem. Yeah,
absolutely. Turnovers are going to be so important in this one. And now let's move to Pleasantville, right? They also started off slow, 0-2, and they also ended the regular season on a 2-game lose streak. So start off slow, ended slow. Now going into the playoffs, there was so much uncertainty on which team is going to show up. And they have been damn impressive once the playoffs have come in. They won 28-7 versus Byram in the quarters, and then winning 14-0 at the number 1 seed Westlake in the semis. So really impressive turnaround. This is another team with a veteran coaching staff who has been there, who has done that. These players have been going to section title. They've watched their program constantly go to section title games, win section title games. So, they all have experience on some level of getting to a section title. But when I look at them offensively, the last 2 games have really predicated on the physical run game. I don't know what, Mars, you're in there, but for me on an outside, I don't know what kumbaya, metamorphosis has happened offensively in the run game. Whether it's simplifying things, whether it's saying, screw it, we're just going to go right after you. And they have been winning up front. They are moving guys at the point of attack, and the running backs, led by Sadao, are hitting the hole hard, right? A lot of times earlier in the year, I felt they weren't getting a lot of movement. The running backs were kind of dancing a little too much in the backfield, and it led to a running game that hasn't been that consistent. Not so much the last 2 games. They've run for over 150 yards in 2 straight games, and that's good. Running the ball with Sadao, running the ball at times with Hudzinski, running some of these jet sweeps with Reish and Strauss, right? So the run game has been very impressive. The O-line, tight ends deserve a lot of credit. And you're going to also see these condensed Wildcat formations. They've come out last 2 weeks. We've seen in years past with Picard doing it. And they're just running it right at you and saying, hey, the running back, pick a lane that you see open up. It could be a play side, it could be backside, but just use your eyes. And, you're just going to see a bunch of drive blocks and double team blocks up front. So find the lane and hit it as hard as you can. And that has been successful for them. Also, they've thrown for less than 10 attempts the last 2 games, right? So it hasn't been predicated, but you know what? The passing game, they've been efficient and not turning the ball over. That's what's been going on in the playoffs, and you see that has done wonders for this team. They're not going to be killing you scoring 35 plus, but if you limit the turnovers, run the ball well, play good defense, that has been the formula in the playoffs for Pleasantville and has been working for them. And you got, targets like McPhee, I think, has been good at blocking the ball, being a big target as a receiver. Now, the last time they played Ardsley, though, Mars, they had less than 100 total yards. So you're going to see this Pleasantville, offensive line has to be a lot better than they did versus Ardsley. If they could play like they did the last 2 weeks, they have a much better chance because they're moving people at the point of attack. They did not do that the last time they played Ardsley. So because the run game got stifled so much, they had to get into passing the ball more, and it wasn't efficient. I think they were like 4 of 12 passing the ball. So it wasn't efficient because that's not what they're comfortable doing. They're comfortable running the ball and then throwing, ahead of the chains. That's kind of the big thing. So run your game. You're going to get those condensed formations, but I love some of the little wrinkles you saw, and I have a clip of it, of kind of the misdirection getting on some of the jet sweeps, because Ardsley coming in 5-man fronts, 7, 8 guys in the box, the outside runs could be open here. So that could be something as well. Defensively, this is another group that has been pretty strong all season long. I mean, they've really picked it up the last 2 weeks, and the emphasis that I have seen, at least on tape, is limiting big plays, right? We've seen at times throughout the year, Pleasantville defense has been pretty good all year, but they have given up big plays, big chunk plays, big long touchdowns. And that was both running the ball and passing the ball. They have kind of these lapses where they can, they allow a team to get into the second level of the defense, and then they're missed tackles on the back end, right? That has been limited the last 2 games. I think I've only counted 1 play that a team hit 30 yards against, I think it was Byram. But outside of that, they have really done a really good job of limiting big plays. In the last 2 games, 5 sacks and 3 turnovers forced. So, last week they had an INT touchdown by Reish, and you've had guys like Reish, Sadao, who's been really good this playoffs, running the ball and playing defense. McPhee, Fucillo, Mueller, Feeney, Hagan, multiple guys step up defensively, really good at funneling everything in between the tackle box and allowing some of these playmakers to clean it up, like Sadao. And that's going to be the key. Limit the big plays. Force Ardsley to win tackle to tackle. Don't allow them to get to the outside. Don't give up those broken plays for 30-plus yard touchdowns, right? Keep everything in front of you. Step up, make the tackle, swarm to the ball. That's the key to them, because this is a good defensive unit that has some of these mental lapses that lead to these long touchdowns that are backbreaking at times. Mars, thoughts on Pleasantville, and then you'll give me the matchup while we go to film.
Yeah, I feel like interesting thing for Pleasantville was that it was like a revenge game. Each game in the playoffs was a game that they lost the last 2 games of the regular season against Byram and Westlake, and it was their chance to get revenge. And it seemed like they, like you said, they had that transformation. And they played, I feel like, a completely different game. They felt like they played more aggressive. They played angry, and they felt like they were playing for a bigger moment, right? And I feel like that's what they lived up to it. And I think a lot of people did not expect that Pleasantville or Ardsley would make it to this point. I know Frank did. I know you.
But
did.
I was getting. I already. They made me so nervous that I went against my gut.
Yeah, I mean, and that was the thing. I think almost everybody selected 2 different teams. They thought Bronxville Westlake would be the final 2, and here we are. The 2 5 and 4 teams in B are the two contenders for the section title itself. And like I said, Pleasantville and Ardsley have been battling this entire season, and it's just it culminates in this moment, right? And I feel like if I'm going to jump into my
what's your Mars matchup? Yeah,
my Mars matchups, and this might not be surprising, but it's going to be really simple. The Pleasantville offensive line versus this front 7 from Ardsley. And I feel like, this honestly, if it wasn't Somers Rye, this would be the matchup of the sectional. Because when you look at the overall, the season itself, no one expected either of these teams to be there, but through straight grit, through heart, they made it here. And what really defined the offseason for both these teams was their front, whether it was Pleasantville's offensive line or whether it was Ardsley's defensive front 7. And when I look at this game, I think it will be defined by how aggressive the Hogs are up front for Pleasantville on the offensive end and how they battle against each other, especially against Ardsley's probably, in my opinion, best front that they have or best unit they have on their team. When Pleasantville, and I'll say this, when Pleasantville was trying to find their identity, they were struggling, right? But when they finally they threw away all the crazy motions and all these unique formations, and they said, you know what? Let's just go simple. Like, let's limit the thinking and just play aggressive. And in the last 2 games, you saw that epitomized in how they played. They said, we're just going to come right at you, not to think. And that's where you saw this offensive line really took shape, right? They were clearing out holes. They were beating people up front, and they opened up lanes for guys like Lou Sadao, David Ozinski, Jesse Strauss, Reish, right, to really make big plays for them in the run game. And they really then opened up the rest of the offense to be able to do more things. Even though the passing game was not going to be massive, it allowed for them to succeed. And I also then look at Ardsley the same way. I said it really just depends on who's going to win the trenches, because Ardsley really completed their momentum swing because they were bullying Bronxville's offensive line, right? And they were owning the trenches, and they made it super difficult for Bronxville to really get any sort of consistency. So when I look at this game and these 2 units, it's going to be, the winner is going to be who can be the more of an aggressor, which group can be more on the attack and stay consistent. And whoever can do that will win this game.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And for the film, I'm going to look at Ardsley stopping the run. They were really good at stopping the tackle-to-tackle runs. They give up some plays on the edge, but I'll go into them stopping the run. And look at Pleasantville's rush attack that has gone over 150 yards the last 2 weeks. So let me pull that up. And first I want to start with Ardsley. And again, when you pull off the upset, you got to do things that most people don't think you can, which a lot of people, including myself, thought, Bronxville in the trenches have been so dominant, it's going to be hard for Ardsley to compete with it. But they did. They really won by anchoring down at the point of attack. And you're going to see here, Bronxville comes out, they have 3 backs, 2 fullbacks, 1 tailback, a lot of meat inside. They like to run the ball. So what I like with ours is they mix it up between 5-man fronts and 4-man fronts, and sometimes played some games with the linebacker. You can see right here, he starts off as, right over the center, and then he's going to bail out back to his linebacker spot. And you might be asking, why do they do stuff like this? It's to mess with the lineman, right? They're still going to have the same number. It's still going to be 7 in the box, right? Doesn't change whether he's on the line or not, but he's trying to mess with the linemen and their rules and responsibilities. So you can see him faking there. He gets back. They're going to be running pretty much power football right here. And these linebackers don't hesitate. You're going to see it's one step and go for a lot of these guys. The linebacker who's peeling back, you're going to see he's going to take off right here, blow right past that lineman. but it's a little bit hard to see at the point of attack, but they do a really good job of anchoring down. You can see no movement at the point of attack. You got a little push on the backside, but at the point of attack, look at all the white jerseys. No movement there, right at the 1 yard to gain. And they did a really good job here and then swarming to the football after. You saw that a lot versus Bronxville on run plays, especially tackle to tackle. Guys like Speckman really stood out on tape for me. Here's another example, a big one. And I know this is by the goal line, but I emphasize this play for a specific reason. You can look at Bronxville, they have 2 backs in the backfield. This is their version of the Wildcats, something you see Pleasantville do. A bunch of fullbacks, 2 backs in the backfield, and they're looking to run you over. And again, so important here. They got 2 backs here. You could see it's going to prompt Ardsley to go to a 6-man front, right? Practically a goal line. They got 9, 10 guys within 3 yards of the line of scrimmage. And so when you come out here, Pleasantville comes out here, expect to see similar stuff like this from Ardsley. But the big question is, how do they rally backside, right? It's going to be so important. He's just going to run right. But good running backs, they can attack play side. They can also bounce it backside. So how do these guys rally? Again, look at it. Look at the point of attack. They're getting no movement here. They're not getting the same movement that they're used to. 1 yard of movement. They're really anchoring down. But look at the backside right here. Look at the D lineman pulling his arm through, scraping down the line of scrimmage, taking away that backside gap. And you can see he just gets stonewalled. Nothing. 3rd and goal. And again, this is with all the meat, all the strength, 2 running backs in the backfield, similar to what you see Pleasantville does. Ardsley does a really good job anchoring down at the point of attack. Last week, it's going to be so important again to do that this time around. Also backside. Then I go to Pleasantville. And the rush attack has been super potent. And you can see, I just showed this last play, but here's Pleasantville's version, right, of the Wildcat. You got tight ends, you got backs, you got their 2 stud backs in the backfield in Sadow and Hudzinski. And again, this is not complicated, right? They got all this meat, and they're just going to run the ball. Now, Westlake had a 5-man front, but you could see all these guys compensating to the strength, the 2 fullback side, which, if a team does that, could leave the backside open. And that's why they leave the option for the back to attack whatever hole you see opens up. So they're overcompensating. You still got, 9 guys in the box, right? So you think you have the numbers. But again, the vision of the back, this is all just power blocking right here. Double teams, drive blocks. But look at the running back right here, right? He has the option to cut back if it's open. They do a really good job of washing down the backside, and they don't stay in their gap backside, which opens things up. Great run there, great vision, leads to a huge chunk play, which ended up being a touchdown. This is what you're going to see. It's not going to be pretty football, but it's going to be them executing their blocks on these drive blocks and allowing their running back to pick the hole that opens up. It's going to be so important. They're forcing a defense to be disciplined both on the play side and backside. Another thing I really liked is some of the wrinkles that they did in the run game last week. Here's one example of it. Right? You get another 5-man front. Now they have 2 flankers to the right. Right? They have a tight end flanker to the left. And you're still getting the 5-man front trying to stop the run. So it's like, okay, we get these tight boxes here. Let's run to the outside. But with some misdirection. They're going to pull Lyman to the left. Sadow's going to run to the left. But they're going to hand it off on this jet sweep. Because you're playing man-to-man backside. So if you can get these blocks on the edge and allow some of your speedsters to get into space, you can get some big plays here. Again, love the misdirection. Look at the linebackers bailing because those 2 linemen pulled, because of Sadow. That means, hey, you can get one-on-one blocking to the outside here. You can execute, you can move the chains, and that's what they do here. Reach is fast, elusive. Look at this, 15 yards, just like that. The combination of power running with some of your Wildcat, some of the spread running with some power downhill, and also these jet sweeps. There's some wrinkles here that Pleasantville can do and have done that have been pretty good, and I'm expecting to see it again this time around. All right, Mars, I know you're not picking this one. I am. And this was not an easy one to pick because both these teams have shown their grittiness. Both these teams have been very physical the last few weeks. I really like the way both defenses have played. The question to me is, which defense is going to prevent the big plays? Right? That's going to be the key. And, when I look at these 2 teams, Ardsley has done a really good job of limiting the mistakes they made, and so has Pleasantville. And Pleasantville has done a really good job of forcing turnovers. This has been a down-the-wire pick for me. I made this pick about 10 minutes before the show, going back and forth. Now, I have to admit, back in August, those in my Patreon know who I picked in the section title game, and I picked this game, Pleasantville and Ardsley. And in the end, I came away with Pleasantville winning the game. And I'm not going back on my gut this time. I am going to go with Pleasantville to win. This is going to be a grinded-out football game. Strong defenses on both sides, trying to run the football. You know, I think Ardsley's passing attack is ahead of Pleasantville, but I'm expecting to see Pleasantville run the football kind of like they did versus Westlake, have some success when a lot of teams didn't expect them to. And I do think Sadow has been so good these last couple weeks. I think it continues this time around, and Pleasantville finds a way in a tight one to win late. All right, Mars, the final game, the main event, which is not that one, but pressing the wrong button already. And that is the AA matchup. We have Mamaroneck 7-3 versus North Rockland, who is 8-2. And these two teams played in week 2, long time ago, where Mamaroneck won 20-14. Now, historically, North Rockland is 10-2 versus Mamaroneck, but Mamaroneck has won 2 of the last 3 games in this matchup. And let's start with Mamaroneck. They won in their path to the finals, 35-20 versus Suffern, and then 17-14 versus Scarsdale in the semis. And when you look at them offensively, it obviously starts, you have to bring up their quarterback in Jacobson. Him being back has really changed things. Now, his numbers haven't been eye-popping off the charts. He has, 2 touchdowns the last 2 games. But his presence has brought stability to this offense because his threat to run the ball and his threat to throw the ball really does change the way you have to play this Mamaroneck offense. So he has been so important with his presence. Now, will he run the ball? He hasn't run the ball as much as he did earlier in the year. Does that change this time around? It's going to have to. Because the last time they played, when he just came back, some of these other backs have stepped up, like Kobe, Cooper, have been really good for them. Davidson, obviously, as a receiver and a rusher. But when they played North Rockland the last time, quarterback counters were really successful, right? Because North Rockland is an aggressive defense. They like to bring blitzes. And so at times they can run up the field because they're very aggressive. And Mamaroneck caught them at times running underneath and moving the chains along and controlling time of possession. So those quarterback counters are going to be huge. These running backs and Cooper and Kobe are going to have to really move the chains. And then these playmakers out on the outside, and Davidson and Bone, are going to have to be they're going to have to win these one-on-one matchups versus a great secondary because North Rockland's going to be very aggressive. They're going to look to bail out to stop the run because they have a lot of trust in these secondary guys. And they'll play off coverage and read the quarterback to see where he's looking and try to make plays on the ball. You have to identify where that man coverage is, and these receivers got to win those one-on-one matchups because they got to create some chunk plays outside of the run game. Running game was really good for them last time. Expect to see them test again, try to run underneath these blitzes, especially off the edge from North Rockland. But they have to counter that by identifying where the man coverage is and winning those one-on-ones, Mars. And this offensive line won the battle for them the first time around. North Rockland's defense has been really good. Can this offensive line win the second time around where they control things, good pass protection, and opening up some holes when you see some heavy fronts and some blitzes coming off? Can this offensive line execute on some of these heavy boxes is going to be extremely important because time of possession was won by Mamaroneck the first time. That's how they can win again. They have the formula. Can they execute it is going to be the big question for me. Defensively, listen, they had a strong first half in the quarters, and I thought they played really, really well last week as a whole in the semifinals versus Scarsdale. The last time they played North Rockland, Mars, they only allowed 12 total yards rushing. And that is obviously so important, is to defend Jaquan Johnson, who has been so good for North Rockland. And a big part of that and a big part of their offense is big plays. 20-plus yard plays have been, North Rockland, I think, leads the section in it. Right? I didn't do the numbers, but I feel like they lead the section in it. They have had so many. And once you get some of these playmakers like Jaquan Johnson to the second level, there's not anyone who's really going to take him down. So that's kind of the big thing that Mamaroneck's defense has to do. Keep everything between the tackle boxes. They did a really good job of playing complementary football by running the football, controlling time possession, and limiting big plays. They gave up a big play passing, which again, that's what got North Rockland back in that game the first time around. But that is the formula. Limit big plays, force North Rockland to be methodical, because at times we've seen North Rockland turn the ball over at times and also have penalties. But if you give them those big chunk plays, they put so much pressure on your defense, and it really gets North Rockland rolling offensively. Thoughts, Mars, on Mamaroneck?
Yeah, I feel like when Jacobson had come back, and I feel like it really changed this team, right? Because remember, when he was out, the offense felt stagnant. Like they really weren't moving. They were not consistent. But once he got back, it really did change this momentum again for Mamaroneck. And obviously, they have a lot of guys that can make big plays, but Jacobson is obviously the key cog to this offense. And I just feel like defensively, they've always been aggressive. They've done a great job all season long when it comes to, keeping games close. It's really just been their offense that has been inconsistent. And you really saw them control the game when it comes to Scarsdale. Scarsdale was a very tough team, obviously, but Mamaroneck just felt like everything was going their way. They've been really good on the misdirection plays, the counters, and they've really been hitting the holes hard. It's really going to be about their offense has to just be consistent. I feel like their defense has always been solid. It's about really limiting the big plays from North Rockland, but then they have to capitalize on mistakes that this North Rockland defense may make.
Yeah. And now let's go to North Rockland. I mean, they've been dominant in the playoffs. They won 42-0 versus Ketchum in the quarters, 28-0 versus Carmel in the semis. I mean, just absolutely dominant on their way to the section finals. And offensively, I mentioned they're a big play offense. We talked about it a lot. They rely a lot, this offense, on motions and on shifts to either outflank teams or to really mess with defenders' eyes, right? Who they're looking at, who they're reading, just to get them to slow down and allow their players to get to the second level, to get to the outside. And they rushed for over 500 yards the last two games during this playoff run. I mean, it's been sensational. Running back Johnson had 240 yards and 4 touchdowns last week. In total, he's had over 1,100 yards and 20 touchdowns on the season. To me, he's the front runner, I think, for MVP. Again, we're going to do the season awards at the end, but he's obviously up there for MVP in AA. Number 15, Norman, also has made some plays on some of these jet sweeps. And quarterback Perini, who has had some real bright moments. He has 9 touchdowns on the season. Has had a couple INTs that have hurt them. He's 9 touchdowns, 6 INTs. And they got some of these speedsters on the outside, and Lawrence and Jaslow and Mosley, that can hit some big plays. And because of Jaquan Johnson on the inside, you're going to get man coverage at times, which allows these guys to get into the open field and make these big chunk plays. Now, the last time they played Mamaroneck, they did not have a lot of possessions, right? Because defensively, they were out on the field a lot. And so they had limited possessions. They were down. They had to throw more than they probably wanted to. They also had 3 turnovers. So we've seen at times when North Rockland's not getting those big plays they're normally accustomed to, you'll see some penalties. You'll see some turnovers. So it's going to be so key to play some clean ball and keep attacking Mamaroneck out on the edge. That's going to be the key thing because they have the speed advantage if they can get to that second level of the defense. Defensively, they've been really good. They have not given up an offensive touchdown so far in the playoffs. They have forced 6 turnovers in the last 2 games, and they have multiple playmakers at each level. I mean, this defense has really stepped up. Kusalaj, and I apologize for butchering his name, Tucky have 3 sacks each on the year. Garofol, Prisco, Mosley have been some big playmakers defensively. And then they probably have the best secondary in the section. And guys like St. Fleur, Lawrence, Jaslow, Johnson, those guys have combined for 7 INTs on the season. So for me, what does North Rockland have to do? Don't run up the field, right? That would hurt them last time. Counters really hurt them because they got too aggressive. They would penetrate too much up the field and they would run underneath them. So be gap disciplined and force again. If you can get Mamaroneck into second, third, and long, even with Jacobson and these wide receivers, your secondary can now be very aggressive. And that's what leads to their turnovers. So if you can slow down their running game, don't get into the second and shorts, third and shorts, because that's what hurt them last time. then giving up that first down. The clock keeps ticking away and they get run down. So that's going to be so important to win on those early downs in this time. Mars, last one of the year. What's the Mars matchup?
Yeah, when I look at this matchup, I'm looking at Mamaroneck's wide receivers versus North Rockland secondary. And, I'll be honest, Mamaroneck has made me eat my words several times this year. And that should be the mentality going into this game as well. Jacobson absolutely controlled the game against Carmel. And obviously they had against Scarsdale in last week in the playoffs. But I've seen him multiple times where he's just kind of owned games, right? The offense has been efficient. They've been kind of owning the time possession, and the defense has been very aggressive. But receivers like Davidson, who had 2 touchdowns last week, along with Bone, have been proven to be playmakers in the passing game. The big question I have when looking at this matchup is seeing whether or not the secondary of North Rockland can limit the big plays from these high-level athletes. Guys like Lawrence, Jaslow, Johnson, Seyfloor have proven to all be ball hawks that have really caused turnovers to a high level because they find one slight mistake. So my expectation is that Mamaroneck would look to include players like Kobe and Cooper to be more involved in the passing game, right? To put more pressure on this secondary, because yes, you have a lot of athletes. The idea is if you can try to overload them with some of your guys who will be more predominant in the run game, maybe you might make it more difficult for the secondary. The combination of speed and aggressiveness from North Rockland secondary will be the big question I have overall, because if North Rockland's pass rush can get to Jacobson and give this secondary a chance to capitalize on a mistake, then they will lead to some turnovers. And by the way, all those guys I mentioned, like you said before, combined for 7 interceptions.
Yeah,
that's a lot, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like that's going to be the big thing I'm looking for this game.
Yeah. All right, with that, our last film session of the year, guys, and that's going to be looking at this Mamaroneck offense and the North Rockland offense. Let me pull that up. And again, guys, your last chance. You can throw any questions in the chat. We'll answer them at the end. All right. With that said, let's start with Mamaroneck. And what they did well versus North Rockland is constantly move the chains and winning on these early downs. And here's an example of it. 1st and 10, they're going to have a bunch formation to the right, 3 receivers to the right, 1 receiver to the left. And running the ball out of this proved pretty well, right? Even with the 2x2. But you see, North Rockland's got 8 guys in the box. And a lot of guys heavily slanted towards the outside, right? So numbers-wise, it's not like they're running against a light box here. But if this offensive line can execute and they can take good angles, you could still run against these heavy set boxes. And Mamaroneck shows you can, right? They're going to fake the running back to the right. You're going to see this bunch guys kind of just run off their defenders and a couple linemen pulling from the backside, right? And you can see right here, pulling from the backside. The defensive end has to stay because he doesn't know if the running back is getting the ball, but he's really acting as the decoy. But look how tight these blocks are, and look at the path the quarterback takes. They do a really good job winning at the point of attack again, but look how aggressive this defensive line is. They're 2 or 3 yards up the field. And so it allows for some underneath runs. And so they do a good job moving those, washing those defenders down. And these linemen pulling do a good job, again, sealing the outside. You're creating lanes here. And so even though they're very aggressive, really good job by the quarterback, keeping the runs tight. And look at the offensive line, executing their blocks, winning their one-on-one matchups. That's going to be so important if North Rockland is going to be super aggressive to run underneath their aggressiveness. And that's an example of it. The other thing they're going to have to do is identify and win against man coverage. And you can see this is a really nice play by the quarterback, by Mamaroneck, against a disguise and a very tough Scarsdale defense here. You can see they're 2x2 here. Right? They come out in the spread, and Scarsdale's playing a nice game here. You can see they got 7 guys near the line of scrimmage. So you're thinking, okay, you're going to get man coverage across the board. But Scarsdale actually is going to drop one of these edge guys. They're going to play zone one way and man the backside. So it's going to be so important because North Rockland, with their secondary, they can disguise some things. So it's going to be so important to identify where the man coverage is and win those one-on-one matchups. So they're going to play this game thinking that they're coming from both sides. On the backside, this is the route combination. So it's going to be so important to, again, identify where the zone is. You see, he looks to his right, sees that guy is dropping. They're in zone coverage here. So he looks back to the man side. Now, you can only do this when you have good protection. Look at the protection up front. Really good job by the offensive line, blocking, giving the quarterback some opportunities, and look at him win this one-on-one, leading to a big chunk play. And again, against this North Rockland defense, running against these heavy, aggressive boxes underneath it, winning against these one-on-one matchups are going to be so huge in the passing game. But now I go to North Rockland. I got to tell you, we've talked about it and shown these plays quite a bit. And they use a lot of motions and shifts. They're trying to get to that second level, mess with the defenses. And you can see, here's an example of it. They're going to motion to the left, and they're going to run with Jaquan Johnson. They're going to pull lineman. The H-back right here is going to take a step to the right and then come back. I just want you to show the defense actually takes pretty good angles here. They're handing the ball off. They're motioning this guy to the outside as a decoy, and they're handing it to the inside. And if you look at it right here, the defense actually plays this pretty well, right? You got some pressure from the backside. Defensive end doing a pretty good job. Initially, it feels like, hey, they got this pretty covered. But Jaquan Johnson puts so much pressure on you, you really have to swarm him to get him to the ground. Because even though initially you feel there, look at the speed he has. And now, that offensive lineman out there on the outside gets a seal on the edge. So if you're not disciplined, if you're not rallying, they're really going to make you pay. So the initial play was good. Jaquan bounced to the outside, and he get this. It's see you later. He really tests your contain. Even on inside runs, you have to be so disciplined all the time because he's going to make you pay. Another thing is this pass attack, right? They got a tight end here, 2 backs, so defensively you're going to get some loaded boxes. And because they got so much speed all across the field, 7 guys in the box, you're going to get man coverage, but look at the man coverage here. These guys are, again, I know it's second and long. They're 10 yards off the ball, off their man, 10 yards off their man, which leaves for a lot of open space, right? So North Rockland does something smart here. They're going to run a little screen, right? It's going to be a quick out. This outside receiver is really going to be a blocker, but he's got to wait for him to throw it. And that's what he does. Well timed. Look at the space here. And you got the speed like guys like Lawrence. Again, this is a 5-yard out leading to a 40-yard play. Because there's so much speed out there, and because of guys like Jaquan Johnson in the backfield, they're playing man coverage against these speedy receivers. Which North Rockland, again, if you're efficient, get the ball in their hands in space, can really make you pay. All right, Mars, last game pick of the year. Who do you got winning the AA title and why?
Yeah, obviously this is tough, right? I said this earlier, but every time I picked against Mamaroneck, they always find ways to maybe eat my words. And, North Rockland, I know they have throughout the season, we saw them really be impressive. But I think the moment where a lot of people saw North Rockland as being that contender was against Scarsdale when they pulled off that game in the end, and they really showed out. And ever since then, it felt like North Rockland was just dominating, right? They just found ways to get their playmakers in space. And I just feel like this game can either go 2 ways, right? You're either going to have a very low-scoring game because the time is going to go by really fast, with Mamaroneck really trying to slow down the pace and really try to control the time of possession with Jacobson and others to try to just say, we're just going to drain the clock and be efficient. Or the game could go drastically in the other direction, and North Rockland might have one of those speed shows that start scoring at will at times because one mistake that a defender makes leads to a big gain or a touchdown. And it's one of 2 ways. And
which way?
It's weird. It's weird for me because I know that if I pick make my choice, it's going to be banner material for a lot of people. I'm hoping to see that my face gets plastered on lockers tomorrow and everything. But I'm going to go with North Rockland. I feel like their speed is unmatched. I feel like no team in Section 1 right now is matching the level speed. Maybe, some guys in other classes like in A, that it might match the speed. But North Rockland feels like they're in a tier of their own when it comes to speed and the playability of some of these athletes that they have in the open space. And I feel like if Mamaroneck does not contain these players, then I really don't know how they're going to match up to them, especially in the way that they've been playing. They've been running teams out of the building. So I feel like it's really going to be interesting to see what happens. But I really do think North Rockland has a speed to get outside, to make plays. And if you make one mistake, you don't rally to the ball, North Rockland's proven that they'll make you pay for it. So I'm going to go with North Rockland here.
this is a tough one. I mean, a lot of people are on North Rockland, and I understand why, because North Rockland has been so impressive, really on both sides of the ball, as they got on this win streak. 7 wins, I believe, now in a row. And, you know, this is the first time they've gone to the section title since 2013. I think since they lost to White Plains. Last time they won, I think, was it 2011 or 2012? So it's been a while. Now, for Mamaroneck, it's been even longer. So I got to tell you, I think North Rockland is the favorite, deservingly so. They just got so much speed. But Mamaroneck has a lot of grit to them, right? A few years back when they played Carmel and lost in the second, they had a lot of speed. They had so many playmakers. This one is a different type of team. They're like a gritty team, a win-time possession team. And at times you've seen them explode. This is, again, a tough one. I understand why a lot of people pick North Rockland, and I was heavily favored towards North Rockland. But I really like the grit of Mamaroneck. I love the grit of them. I love the fight back they have, and I like the play of them up front on the offensive line. And before the season, I picked Mamaroneck to win it all, Mars. I can't turn on that now. I am going to go with the upset. I think it's going to be a huge upset. I think it's going to be a tight game. Have a real respect for both teams and where North Rockland has come, but I am going to go with Mamaroneck to win. All right, everyone, that was our show. I don't see any questions in the chat. Just want to once again thank you guys so much. We had a great year of shows here. Appreciate you guys and your support as always. Hit that thumbs up, hit that sub button. Really enjoy the section title games, whether you're playing in it, watching it, coaching it. Like I said at the beginning of the show, these opportunities are not easy to come by. Savor the path that has gotten you here, but also give everything you have and let the cards lie where they stand. Just like us at Fam Sports, the future we don't know, but we gave it everything we had. So with that said, guys, enjoy the games, and we'll see you all hopefully very soon.